On today's episode of the Leadmore podcast, we talk about the topic of philanthropy. We've never hit this topic in 100 plus episodes of the Leadmore podcast. So I sat down with my friend, Cindy Elifrits Peterson. She's the founder of Maximizing Excellence, I would call them like a strategic consultant in the nonprofit space. They've been around for 14 years in the Sioux Falls area. And we dug into this topic, not just what is philanthropy, why do people give, what motivates people to give, but how can a leader think about philanthropy strategically in their plan, and how can they, give to the right causes and be involved in a way that they want to be involved. And if you're on the other side of the table, if you are a leader in the nonprofit side, say executive director or fundraiser, you must listen to this episode. Cindy walks us through her 3-part framework. It's called NBD, which is the need, the value, and the differentiation. I'll let her explain it, but this is something you need to do as a person who also has a part-time gig as an executive director in a nonprofit, Leadership South Dakota. I was taking notes and I was like, I'm going to do this workshop with my board and we're going to go through this, and this is going to be really good stuff. So with that, I think you'll really enjoy this episode. Cindy gets right to the point and offers a lot of value in 30 minutes here. So with that, let's take a listen to this week's episode of the Leadmore podcast with Cindy Peterson. All right, welcome back to the Leadmore podcast. Super excited to be here with a good friend of mine, Cindy Elifrits Peterson, the founder of Maximizing Excellence. How are you doing today, Cindy?
Having a great day, John.
Good. What's new in your world right now? What's kind of occupying your brain power? What are you thinking about?
Well, we are in growth mode at Maximizing Excellence, and we're looking forward and backwards, kind of in nostalgia mode too. Next month, my company will celebrate 14 years.
14 years. Congratulations. Like, you're in the minority of making it that long. Some company you created, so that puts you at 2010. So let's go in a time machine back to 2010. You're not from Sioux Falls, but you've had most of your career here. What was going on in Sioux Falls that you felt like the world needed this idea?
I think there's a lot of things that motivate people to start a business, and a lot of times it has as much to do with things unrelated to the business than an opportunity or a need. And I would put myself into that category. I had just gotten engaged.
Okay.
And I, at the time, was the resource development director at the Sioux Empire United Way and loving it, getting to be a part of the community from working with business leaders, also getting to work with the nonprofits and seeing how all those dollars went to work. And I knew that my life was going to change very quickly. And what I was doing and the way I was doing it wasn't going to fit perfectly.
Okay.
And so how do I take what I do and all the things I love most and fit it into this new world and this new chapter of my life? And I remember the idea came and said, well, maybe I can do what I'm doing right now at United Way for a lot of organizations.
Yeah.
There's a lot of approaches to fundraising. Mine seem to be awfully successful. I would also see great organizations not doing it as well as I think they could and as well as their mission deserved. And if I could be a part of making those aspects of their organization stronger, that's a really cool way to impact a lot of people. So
That's cool.
Those two things kind of came together.
Yeah, so it started out of a personal need, which is great. I think less common in 2010 than you hear about it now, where people are like, whether it be COVID or the pandemic or just the world being so global on the internet, a little easier to build maybe this side hustle. So in 2010, it was probably felt like a risk. I'm sure it felt like a leap pretty early in your professional career. What was sort of the initial response, or how did you know, I guess, that you were onto something, or how did you know what was like the signals that you thought, okay, I got something here?
I remember going into my boss's office, who was the person who brought me to Sioux Falls and gave me this huge opportunity. And I was really nervous.
Yeah.
And what this individual said to me was, Cindy, if you do this, United Way dollars will have more impact because all these organizations are running better. This makes a lot of sense in so many ways. And I think you can do it.
Cool.
And so that was one of the first conversations that I had. And I just obviously remember it all these years later.
That's super cool. I'd say if I were to describe, if I had to summarize 100 plus episodes of Leadmore down to one concept, the most prevailing concept is that leaders are often nudged by somebody to go for it, right? They might have had the idea or like kind of wondered, but like we all have somebody or some people or groups of people that say go for it. And so I love to hear that you had a story like that too.
There was
So
there were a lot of little nudges that were happening all about the same time.
cool.
Absolutely.
So you're in this phase where you're like looking back, but also still in growth mode. I know you guys just did a big rebrand, which is exciting. Tell us, like, just give us the TLDR of like what does Maximizing Excellence do today in 2024?
You bet. Maximizing excellence, we partner with people and organizations that want to improve their effectiveness and achieve high impact. The majority of the organizations we work with are in the nonprofit sector. We spend a lot of our energy on organizations that focus on economic development, that focus on health and human services, and quality of life. We help organizations through strategic planning, through capacity building, resource development, and we actually get to do a lot of feasibility studies, needs assessments. Something I love most with what I get to do is being a part of building things. Literally, we do a lot of capital campaigns.
Cool. That's great. Thanks for the rundown. And I will say that, like, in the last couple of years, I've got to know you as well as now also running a nonprofit with Leadership South Dakota. I sort of made a mind shift on this topic of philanthropy and how leaders can use this as a tool. And I know that sounds a little bit maybe like harsh, but like you can feel good and you can do good, but also it can be smart, be good, I guess. Maybe that's the right way to say it. And so you've helped me kind of think about like, oh, like in our toolbox as a leader, CEO, philanthropist, whatever you want, whatever title you want to claim, giving is a huge part of it, and giving in an effective way. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about, why I wanted to bring you on the show today, because I think, the goal of Leadmore is that each episode can be a strategy or an arrow in your quiver. And this topic of philanthropy is something we've never talked about in 100 plus episodes. So tell me, kind of give me your high level, like if somebody, let's just say someone comes into a windfall of money and you're meeting with them for coffee and they're thinking, where do I start? Like, why should I give? Where do you like to start there?
I think I'll first comment on that element of leaders incorporating philanthropy into their decision making.
Yeah.
The truth is, a stronger community creates stronger business.
Yes.
And those two can come together, and that's a good thing. Philanthropy can help people understand their community in a different way. It can help individuals meet others who are like-minded. We, as leaders, we want to spend time with people who think like us and that we can trust, and they can also help us consider something we haven't considered before. And philanthropy can bring leaders together in that kind of way as well.
Yeah. That's good.
And then when you think about a philosophy on giving, or if somebody were to sit with me and ask, where do I start? How do I take this on? Where I would start is finding out where and how they learned about giving in their life. Most
Yeah.
people learn about giving. First of all, giving, I believe, is a learned behavior.
Yes. Agreed.
We usually learn it in our youth from our family or in a church environment. And then as adults, if it didn't quite click or sync then, we learn about it actually in our workplace and our first employment experiences. And we learn it from our peers who are inviting us to come along something they're passionate about. And so I'd want to really understand what is their knowledge and experience with giving in any capacity. That's where I'd start.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, learned. I'm sure it's modeled. They saw somebody, whether it be intimately or across the room. Or okay, that's good. I like that. And you guys are very data backed, data centric approach to strategy at Maximizing Excellence. You guys did this study, this philanthropy study in Sioux Falls, and I won't make you go through the whole thing, but kind of what were like the big takeaways as you did. You interviewed a lot of people to understand kind of what's the state of philanthropy in this part of the world, and what did you learn from that?
There was a point in time not that long ago that Sioux Falls was the second most generous community in the country per capita.
And that's just
And
dollars per person, or what is? Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
which is just, that's part of what makes Sioux Falls as special as it is. And we're fortunate to not only work with a lot of nonprofits, but a lot of the individuals who are serving on their boards are giving to those organizations. And those individuals kept telling us they were feeling fatigued. They were feeling burned out, that the constant coming to them when it came to giving, and not necessarily feeling that others were coming alongside as quickly as the needs were growing. We wanted to really find out if the way people were feeling was really what was going on. And we also believed, because of our passion for the nonprofit sector, if nonprofits knew what motivated our community leaders to give, they could be well equipped to go in and meet with those individuals and approach them in the way that they themselves want to be approached, because that's what they told us. So we thought, if we can help nonprofits be better at asking using data, and we can help those who are being asked be asked in a way that better suited them, everybody wins.
Interesting.
So that was our motivation behind it. We interviewed, and the study was strictly with local philanthropists of all ages.
Mm-hmm.
What we learned is that donor profiles are elusive. I have a lot of empathy for the nonprofit sector, because there is not one way individuals want to be asked. One individual might say, the only way to ask me is to meet with me face to face and build that individual relationship with me. 20 minutes later, we might visit with somebody else who said, I get a lot of joy coming alongside others. I like the energy of an event. Others will say, please, no more events in Sioux Falls. Others will tell stories about all of the solicitation letters they get. They share with their family at Christmas, and their kids help pick what to give to based on those letters. Then the next person says, if I get one more solicitation in the mail, I might change my address. We heard everything, John.
Wow.
The one consistency that did come is that donors want to know the impact of their gift. If they're going to give a second time, they want to know what their dollars did. The other thing they told us that was consistent along the audiences is that they wish they were thanked and stewarded more authentically, and that saying thank you, using their words, often felt like an afterthought. And so what we've done with that information is help nonprofits prioritize what you do and say after a yes, and put as much energy into what happens after the yes as we put into preparing for the ask.
Yeah. I can even probably have some guilt there of just like, you work so hard to get the yes, and then you're kind of on to the next one, right? So would it be fair to say that like maybe a key word in this study is like personalization, like how they want to be asked, how they want to be thanked, and is the takeaway, if you're a executive director or a fundraiser, to simply ask the question of how you like to be asked, or what's the takeaway there?
I think that's really intuitive of you, and it's not that hard to do. Ask someone what they want their relationship with your organization to look like, and then create that environment and build the relationship in the way that it was talked about. It's harder in the sense that it takes more time, and people have to be with the organization long enough for those relationships to build in a beautiful, meaningful way. But the rest of it is just, it really is relationships and connecting and individuals' passions with what your mission does.
And everything you just said is work and takes time, and then you throw in the fact that people in the donor company change, the people in the executive director or the board seats change, and so now you have these crossing relationships that are multi-layered. And cool. Well, you have a really interesting little kind of simple but helpful framework on how to think through this. And I think if you're listening to this episode and you are an executive director or a fundraiser, this will be right up your alley. But even if you're a leader, CEO, entrepreneur, and you're thinking, where do I want to give? These would be good questions to ask the organizations that maybe are approaching you or that you want to approach. So let's dive into it. It's a framework you call NVD. And so I'm going to have you break it down. We'll start with the N. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, just even to give some context to it, we find that whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit, we often struggle with knowing where to start a conversation. At times we struggle even more, particularly in a nonprofit fundraising ask, where to end the conversation. And so NVD is intended to simplify how you build that conversation.
Okay.
The N obviously stands for need. And the first piece of that is and I'll do the three and then I'll kind of jump in.
Sure.
Need is what need do you meet? V, what value do you bring? D, what differentiates your organization from other choices around you?
Okay. Need, value, and differentiation. Got it. Okay.
starting with the end, starting with need, what need do you meet? So often organizations talk about themselves first.
Yeah.
Need is all about who you serve. What need do you meet? What are the struggles? Do you serve individuals? Do you serve families? Are they of a certain age group? What is happening in that individual's life? Where are you infusing what you do to meet the need? So you start by talking about those you serve.
And do you find that, like, I suppose the tendency is to really, I don't want to say inflate, but like really try to make your need feel the maybe the biggest pain or like the most dire or like urgent, or not necessarily? Is it just to be more clear and specific on what the need is?
Well, certainly, an emphasis of urgency is valuable in all sense, but I think it's really a point of building trust with any person you're visiting with, that you truly, truly understand the work that you do.
Yeah. And I suppose it maybe doesn't perfectly fit in this framework, but kind of on the back end of need is like stewardship, right? Or like use, like, you understand what the need is, but also you're going to use my dollars in a good way, right?
It's an education opportunity for a potential donor to better understand the population that they themselves may not have a direct connection with in any way,
Sure.
shape, or form.
Yeah. And I suppose back to your like why someone may choose an event versus a slow growing. Some people want to see it probably and like almost touch it, right? And some people maybe are going to just hear it from the one-to-one relationship over time in terms of how they
Mhm.
feel the need.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's a good example. And then when we look at value, this is really where the organization leans into the work that they do and what value it brings to that potential client, that individual, that family that you just described. What are you doing to change that individual, that family's life?
Hmm.
Are you doing it one on one? Are you doing it in a large scale? A lot of times you hear the word impact in fundraising,
Yeah, I was going to
which
ask about
is
that.
how are you measuring what those dollars are doing, which I think, John, you just kind of spoke to a second ago. And I look at value as being more holistic than that. Being able to show impact to me is and measured outcomes is an example of value. It puts tangibility around value, and value can have a lot of different layers. Does serving that family or that individual actually help a neighborhood? So are you bringing value to a neighborhood? What is the
Mm.
ripple effect of the value if your organization has that kind of impact? Sometimes it's not always like that, but if organizations let themselves think a little more broadly and a little more creatively, I think they can really connect the dots on value being a multiplier effect.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, the chain there, the kind of the trickle down effect, whatever word you want to use. What do you say to the folks who like? Because I remember asking this question in my interview for Leadership South Dakota. Like, how will I know? I mean, I coached this idea. How will I know that I'm doing my job well? How do I know I'm succeeding? Right? And I will admit the answer is like a little bit pretty qualitative. It was like people are, I guess the quantitative metric is people are applying for the program, but we're still getting our sponsors, but also just like people feel good about it. Like if people are, so I'm sure there's a lot of executive directors that are just like, man, value. How do we quantify? How do we track value? You're data centric. What do you do if some of that's a little squishy?
Well, I think measuring value happens before you start doing the work, not as something that oh gosh, I wonder if we can figure that out. And
Okay.
so I think putting intentionality to the front end makes it more more effective. You can also look at measuring value or measuring impact by person and their individual growth, or from a collective, a more macro perspective. Qualitative is very common because there are so many other factors that influence the success of an individual, stake with an individual, than just your program. So
Yep.
really owning the piece you played at the moment in time that you were there, I think is critical. And then you have to look at head and heart. Impact can be, again,
Mm.
if you're looking a little bit more singular, a testimonial, a particular story. I think there's value in longitudinal look back as well. you might ask somebody, let's say Leadership South Dakota, and they talk about their experience and that they went back in the workplace and they learned new communication skills and they got a promotion 6 months
Sure.
later because they could translate the relationships that they built and so on. But what about the folks that were in the program 5 years ago? And
Sure.
how many of the people they still are in touch with? How many of them are donating to Leadership South Dakota annually? Those can all be measurements as well.
Yeah, that's great. Kind of reminds me of like in the for-profit sense, right? Like an entrepreneur says, we're going to solve this problem and start the business. And then you hear about the pivot or like what they realize they're actually solving a different problem or I'm guessing that value, sort of these levels of value sometimes get unlocked later down the road that they're not even aware of.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I also think when an organization is doing very, very well, Leadership South Dakota being a great example of that, there's so many value points you could speak to. How do you use this activity to discipline yourselves? If
Yeah.
you have more than one individual going through the exercise, whether it might be the full staff, I think it's a really, really strong exercise in a lot of ways for a board of directors. What
Yeah.
are the things that you're hearing over and over again? Well, that's what's staying with people who aren't in the mission all day, every day. Those are the things that you talk about first and most. When you've got 15 cool things to say, you got to know which three to start with.
Yeah. That's good. Good. You just gave me a little workshop for my next board retreat. So thank you. Um, what, let's go to the next one because I think this is where we feel a lot of noise and maybe some of that fatigue. So differentiation, how do we stand out?
Absolutely. What differs you from not just others who are doing the same work, but the reality is whoever you're asking to give to your organization is being asked to give to organizations whose missions are completely different than yours.
Yeah.
So how do you differentiate from that as well? Great examples of differentiation obviously have to do with the number of people you might be serving. I think differentiation might have to do with a faith component versus a not faith component. It
Mm,
might have to do with how you utilize space. There's so many things that you can talk about when it comes to differentiation. Your differentiation might be that your organization's been around for 25 years and you've got a proven history. Your
mm-hmm.
differentiation might be, well, we started this 18 months ago and we saw something new and fresh and we thought the way that the solutions been done or how the needs being met needed a fresh solution. That can be a differentiator as well.
Yeah.
Just really knowing what makes what you do special. And when a lot of things donors talk about, whether it was in the study or just in general, and is is there too much duplication of service?
Yeah.
So differentiation is wildly critical to be proactive in how you explain that. A great example, if I might, is with after school care.
Okay. Yeah.
There's lots of after school programs. What differentiates funding one after school program from another? What differentiates me, the mom, from selecting one after school program from the other? Well, maybe the program is at a church. Maybe there's that faith component. Maybe their ratios are 1 to 7 versus 1 to 12. Maybe it takes place at a school, and so you get to use, maybe there's curriculum involved. Maybe there's dinner provided. Maybe there's transportation. Those are all differentiators,
Yeah. Yeah.
not just from the lens of raising dollars, but people utilizing the service and selecting yours when they have choices too.
Yeah. That's good. And not to get too tactical, but just differentiation typically show up in copywriting or here's a video or our landing page or talking points or where do you most often see like good differentiation happen?
I don't know if I see a lot of good differentiation. I think
Oh,
this is a huge opportunity for an organization to differentiate itself is
yeah.
by applying more intentionality around those aspects of the work they do.
Yeah. I think of like, I remember, I think it's probably maybe 2011 was it a conference, an entrepreneurial conference, and this guy named Scott Harrison, the founder of a charity called Charity Water, came out and they very much took kind of the unusual, like the not the tip the atypical approach to nonprofits, like amazing branding and design, really deep integration of technology. And they had this idea of like, we're going to have two organizations, two entities, so that the operations are funded privately by like high net worth individuals, but then if you give $20, 100% of your money goes to water, right? And that was their differentiation, like transparency and 100%, right? And I still talk about it 13 years later.
Well, and also my immediate reaction is, wow, what a smart business strategy. What a smart fundraising tactic. That's a differentiator as well.
Yeah. You got to feel confident that you can go get that operational money, which isn't sexy, right? Because it's
Mhm.
funding salaries and marketing plans, but it makes the fundraising part really powerful, really strong. So that's interesting. Yeah. And so let's take that then. If someone is maybe if differentiation, you feel like on a whole, and I know you're not calling anybody out, feels like it might be lacking, what would you say to a director or a team or a board? How should they whiteboard through their finding their key talking points for differentiation?
I think you can whiteboard the whole process pretty easily. It's one of those things that I think is pretty simple. That doesn't mean it's always necessarily really easy, but to take a board of, I think the most effective way I've seen it used, or I've facilitated it myself, whether it's a fundraising committee, more effectively, I think it's really powerful at a board level because the value of the activity can go well beyond how you use the messaging, but how are you educating your board or how are they educating each other? Have everyone answer all three of those questions individually.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go around and everyone, you start with, and you don't move through them. You start with need, you finish that, and you move to the next and then to the next.
Okay.
So we have everybody write down on a sheet of paper how they would answer that question. And then we get all of it up there. What are we hearing over and over again? Who found something really special that's totally true and we just haven't said? Where are people maybe not quite saying what's as accurate as could be? So again, that's where some of that learning opportunity is.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then you know what themes are coming out. What are you hearing over and over again? So then you do the same with value, you do the same with differentiation. The themes that arise become what you double down on. Those are the things that you lean in on. And how that fits into the element of differentiation. Where are the differentiators that are identified, spoken to in value, and spoken to in need? When you hear that, because they don't necessarily have to be separate, right? They can tie in. Where those all coincide and come together, it's exciting to watch a room put that aha together, and they are all feeling
Hmm.
much more equipped to walk out the door and know what to talk about when there's so much good to say.
Yeah, that's huge. That clarity and like what I was thinking of when you're talking about this exercise is like it speaks to the importance of having a diverse board, unique board, different backgrounds, different geographies. But then you maximize this differentiate, like this uniqueness, but then we're all on the same page in terms of how we talk about it, I think is what you just hit on.
John, think about how nonprofits today want their boards to help them fundraise.
Mm-hmm.
Involving the board in an activity like this helps equip the board with what to say. Sometimes that's what gets in a board member's way is, well, okay, but I don't know if I know enough, or I know I don't know as much as the staff. How can I really tell the story the way it's meant to be told? This activity can be a really powerful tool in strengthening what that looks like.
Cool. Love that. So now I want to ask you, take a moment, think through like who is a, could be local or national, or who do you think is an example of an organization that just really crushes their NBD? Like as you think through how they execute, like it's so clear that they know what they're saying, the board, the mission, the marketing is aligned. Does anybody come to mind?
An organization that I worked with, I guess it's been a couple of years now. Time really flies, right? It's a small but mighty mission. I refer to it Rock Ranch.
Okay.
It's a small entity that's a little bit outside of the Sioux Falls Metro. I think it's kind of a hills, Minnesota.
Okay.
And they use horses to provide therapy and to share the gospel,
Okay.
which is one of their differentiators.
Bingo.
And they built they needed to, the demand for what they did was so great, they wanted to build an indoor riding arena so that they could multiply their effect and they could do their work year round.
Mm.
And so when we went through the NVD activity with them, they really were able to hone in on some pieces. I mean, years later, I'm still remembering. One of their differentiators is they provide a program called Senior Saddles. And they'll take seniors from, let's say, a residential home, a residential
No way.
facility, put them in a bus, bring them out. And they don't necessarily all ride the horses, but they might brush the horses and they start telling stories.
Cool.
And it's just this, I love Senior Saddles. They also provide, obviously, writing and just how to ride a horse, and all those pieces are there that you would expect in a horse arena. But they also do a really special therapy, and they help youth through trauma and grief through what's called EGALA. And it's a special type of trained counseling using equestrian.
Interesting.
And and then that faith piece that was there, and how they infuse that into the lessons, into the summer theme, and I could go on and on with examples, but they really nailed it.
That's cool. Yeah. So then, even if you maybe like, you might say, I'm not a big horse person, but like the faith component might resonate with you, or the senior component, or some aspect of this differentiation pulls you into the organization.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why you do it, because how can you link your mission with what someone else cares about? And that
Mm-hmm.
allows you to make those connections much more quickly and more authentically.
Cool. Well, before I ask my last question, the superpower question, I did want to take a chance to, you've been doing this. We started off at the top 14 years, worked with a lot of organizations. And I know this was something I talked to you about because I felt like I needed it as a for-profit CEO coming to this side of the sector. You guys have built you call it like a capacity training series. Tell us a little bit about what that looks like and how you guys executing that for like a new service for maximizing excellence.
Absolutely. We call it our resource and capacity building series. And what I've learned for all this time is it's one thing to come in and do this work for an organization, get them from point A to point B. But my passion really comes in how can I equip someone to do this on their own? Because if individuals are more effective and more confident and more efficient, they can do more with the same. And so I'm really, really passionate about that. So what are the key pieces that nonprofit leaders, fundraising executives need? And so we built this training series that can be incorporated not just for the individual, but for an entire team, because we want to create that cohesiveness and collaboration amongst themselves and amongst the other organizations that are participating. So we focus on messaging. We teach NVD as part of that.
Sure.
We talk about donor motivators. We teach people how to make an ask from step 1 to step 5. We really put some tangibility around the how. It's one thing to, okay, yep, that makes sense. I know I need to do that. But now I'm going to go back to my desk and there's 15 other things at my desk. I don't know how to do that. So I'm just going to go back to doing what I'm more comfortable with. It might not work as well as the new idea, but it's what I know how to do. We try to combat that by creating those teachable moments in real time so that they can use it, not just hear it, but they can use it the moment they walk out the room.
That's cool. I like that a lot. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes and link that up if somebody's interested. That starts July?
Mid-July, that's right.
Okay, cool. All right, so I know you've listened to the show before. I always like to ask my favorite question to leaders. What is your superpower, the thing you think you do or the thing you do better than everybody else? And I know you guys are strengths finder people, so I'm curious where you're going to go here.
So there's that strengths component. I had someone tell me what they thought mine was, which is creative problem solving.
Okay.
I honestly think my favorite superpower is my energy and my passion.
Okay.
When I step into something I care about, I refuse to fail. And I want everybody around me to incorporate who they are and what they're best at. And I want to bring that out of people so that together we solve whatever we stepped in the room to solve, and we get to do it together. And how do we create experiences for everybody in the room to enjoy the journey and find joy in whatever it is they're being asked to be a part of? I don't know how not to bring that into a room. I don't know how not to be that. And so, yeah, that might be my favorite superpower.
That's cool. Well, those are the context of a sports team or a company or a capital campaign. You need that person in the room, right, to lift everybody up. And I mean, it's not just maximizing excellence, but it's really holding the standard of excellence to, like, we're only going to succeed. There's no other option. I love that. So, well, Cindy, thanks for coming on the show and teaching all of us a little bit and sharing your story a little bit more. Loved having you here today.
This was super fun, John. Thanks so much.
All right, you take care. All right, thanks, friends, for listening to this episode of the Leadmore podcast. Thank you, Cindy, for coming on. I hope you can take that NVD framework and apply it, whether you are on the nonprofit side or if you are the giver, the philanthropist. Ask these questions, right? Dig into their need. Ask what the value is. How do they differentiate themselves? Two sides to that coin, worth considering. Remember, you can catch all episodes of the Leadmore podcast wherever you subscribe to podcasts. I would encourage you, if you listen on Apple, Spotify, go up there, leave a review. Click that 5-star review. Even better if you want to actually type out a comment. Talk about your favorite episode. Mention your favorite leader of any episode you've ever listened to. That really helps us and helps other people find the show. Remember, we're on video too. You can check out the video format on YouTube. And as always, leaders, take care and be well.